We are going to dive headfirst into the life and crimes of the Bender family, aka the Bloody Benders, a family of serial killers, yep, you heard that right, a family of serial killers from Kansas who lived and murdered / terrorized folks in the late 1800s. They are believed to be German immigrants due to their German accents, but this has never been confirmed. The Bloody Benders are believed to have murdered at least a dozen travelers before things started falling apart for them. Keep watching to learn their fascinating story, how it all came to happen, their crimes, their crazy downfall and subsequent disappearance, right here on All Things True Crime. It's truly chilling. Hi there, my name is Misha. Welcome to All Things True Crime, or welcome back if you are a regular. If you enjoy this video, please like it so more people will see it, and then subscribe to my channel so you won't miss my next video. The subscribe button is right below the video, and then if you ding the bell, you will get notified the next time I upload. That's All Things True Crime. Let's get to it. The Bender family of 1870. Not long after the Civil War, the United States forces the Osage Indians off of their land, moving them southwest from Labette County, Kansas to what becomes Oklahoma, essentially turning the county into a homesteading settlement. Mostly folks who settle here are honest, hardworking, kind men and women, families, trying to create a living for themselves amid the windy, drought-filled plains. The struggle is real, though, and on top of all of the difficulties of starting a new life, far from home and in this area, is the fierce fighting with the soil to produce crops and vegetation. People are constantly worried and stressed, and so occupied with survival that they begin to just accept all newcomers to the area as they see them. A what you see is what you get situation. They don't have the time to get to know folks amid all of the turmoil of the settlement. It's fall 1870, and before the harsh winter sets in, 5 families make their way to Labette County, just northeast of what one day becomes Cherryville. These families consider themselves to be what's called spiritualists. These spiritualists are members of a cult, following the beliefs that people can communicate with the dead. It is a large movement gaining traction in the early 1800s, brought to life by many factors, one large one being the tensions of the looming Civil War. They are a relatively unknown group of folks to the Old West, and as such their presence in the area is no cause for concern or alarm. One of these 5 families is, you guessed it, the Bloody Benders. So it's October 1870, and before the harsh winter sets in, 2 German immigrants, John and John Jr., we're going to call him Paul, and John Bender, make their way to southeastern Kansas, right off the Osage Trail, which leads them from around Fort Scott to Cherryville and on to Independence, Missouri. Now it's believed that they chose this place strategically, as it was outside the range of local law enforcement. Their nearest neighbor was nearly a mile away, it was on the Osage Trail, and it was very near Indian country, aka Oklahoma. They claim their 160 acres against the Homestead Act, which allows any U.S. citizen over the age of 21 to move onto a piece of land, improve it, and then own it after 5 years. With their newly acquired parcel of land, they make their settlement building a one-room cabin about 100 yards off the Osage Trail, so right there. The cabin measures about 16 by 24 feet with a 9-foot ceiling. Underneath the cabin, they end up digging a 7-foot square cellar with a large sandstone slab for a floor and a trapdoor that leads from the cellar up to the one-room cabin. Then they divide the room in half with the wagon canvas. So now with 2 rooms, they decide to turn the back half into their living quarters, while the front becomes their general store and the Bender Inn, where people traveling along the trail can stop in for refreshments and a little shut-eye, or a lot of shut-eye if they aren't so lucky, right? Yeesh. So they also dig a well and they build a stable. The cellar is presumed to be for cold storage and as a shelter from tornadoes. Sounds reasonable. Perhaps the Benders have other plans. By early spring 1871, Pa and John have Ma and Katie Bender join them. Both ladies call themselves Kate. Ma and Pa are probably in their late 60s, maybe early 70s, while John and Katie are early to mid-20s. Now, Ma and Pa Bender are nothing to look at. Not sure about John Jr., but word is Katie is eyes out, tongue roll, very pretty, and always flirtatious. It isn't long after the women arrive that the Benders begin cultivating an orchard, selling groceries, and opening the Bender Inn. Yikes, for business. It's rather obvious to anyone with eyes that Ma and Pa seem like they don't like anyone, or humans in general. So, a couple of misanthropic folks, while John and Katie seem quite the opposite. They attend church and Sunday school, and Katie works part-time at the new Cherryvale Hotel, while also claiming to be a healer of sorts. The Kansas prairie is just an empty expanse at this point, right? And so towns are few and far between. Communication between these towns basically doesn't exist, and folks of course don't carry ID cards. Now, all of that sounds great, all's fine and dandy, till people start vanishing. And mostly these are people that are just passing through, that nobody in the area would really miss. Easy for the town to write off these types of disappearances, especially in the late 1800s on the Kansas prairie. By spring of 1871, Labette County is seeing lots of travelers and lots of disappearances. Now, who in town, if anyone, is almost guaranteed to get eyes on nearly every visitor? Yeah, the folks that own the general store, where travelers would stop off for supplies before continuing on their journey, and the folks that run the local hotel for said travelers to catch a few winks before moving on. Oh yeah, wait, in both instances, that would be the Bender family. May 1871, the body of a man named Jones is found in Drum Creek, his head bashed in and his throat sliced. The only suspect is the man who owns the land the body was found on. No one's ever arrested, charged, or convicted. One lady decides to pay Katie to heal her. Remember, she's claiming to be a healer, right? So this lady pays Katie in the form of an expensive side saddle. Katie is unable to heal her though, of course, right, since she's full of malarkey, and the lady demands her side saddle back. The story goes that the Benders refuse to refund her, then they proceed to threaten her before finally chasing her out of town. While stories like this begin circulating, no one believes them because Katie goes to church, attends Sunday school, and appears to be an otherwise God-fearing young woman. In February 1872, Labette County experiences a blizzard the likes of which they haven't seen before. When the snow finally melts, the residents find the bodies of two men who, just like Jones back in May of 1871, their heads have been bashed in and their throats slit. The town has no suspects at first, but about a year later folks start talking, and a neighbor of the Benders claims to remember seeing Pa driving the men's wagon at the time of the snowstorm. Nothing happens though, as these suspicions aren't enough for an arrest. Several months later, in the fall of 1872, a man by the name of Johnny Boyle, a bachelor, treks the Osage Trail by foot. He begins his journey at Osage Mission with the intention of purchasing a plot of land. He brings with him about $1,900, which is equivalent to just under $45,000 today. Yeah, that's a lot of money. Okay, so who walks around with $45,000 in cash on them? Not me. I would never. Who would? And if for some insane reason I found myself in that position, I would have, an attaché case handcuffed to me with 4 armed guards, right, surrounding me or something ridiculous. I would never do that. That's insane. Anyway, unsurprisingly, he makes it to Labette County and is never seen or heard from again. He never returns home, never buys the land, just poof, disappears. Now, it's still fall 1872. A 29-year-old Civil War veteran, Henry Mackenzie, walks from Indiana to Kansas. That sounds terrible. He's dressed all fancy-like, but only had 40 cents on him. Not quite $10 by today's standards. He is another victim of the Bloody Benders. Although they walked away with his fancy clothes and shoes, they were likely disappointed he didn't have more cash on him, as fancy as he looked and all. Next victim, a man by the name of Ben Brown. Probably another disappointment to the Benders, but not as bad as Henry, as Ben had $36 on him, or about $850, today's equivalent. And he had a pair of expensive horses. This next guy may be their greatest haul of all. William McCrawdy departs from Osage Mission with $2,600 in his pocket. My guess is he's also planning on buying land, just like Johnny Boyle was. So the $2,600 is equivalent to $61,000 and some change by today's standard. He disappears, never returns. Never buys land, just poof. Early spring 1873, a man named George Launcher has a claim near Independence. After the sudden and unexpected passing of his wife, he decides to take his daughter to stay with his parents in Iowa. He purchases a team of horses and a wagon from the local doctor, a man named William York, and he heads north. He never makes it to Iowa, though. Anxious that something has happened to their son and granddaughter, the parents send word to Kansas that George and his daughter never made it. Dr. York, the man George bought the horses from, is also his close friend. He is an intelligent and well-connected man who has heard of the disappearances in Labette County, and also that a wagon and horses had been located near Fort Scott. The horses nearly starved to death. Also found in the wagon are the clothes of a man and those of a young girl. Dr. York heads to Fort Scott and confirms the wagon is the one he sold to George. On Friday, March 28, 1873, the Lawrence, Kansas Tribune reports, quote, Dr. York returned to Fort Scott, attended to his business, and on Sunday left for home. Since that time, nothing has been seen or heard from him, end quote. As a few of the other guys, Dr. York comes to Labette County on an expensive horse and with around $20,000 in today's dollars on him. Dr. York finds the Bender Inn and decides to gather some refreshments and lodge for the night while he investigates his friend's disappearance. He's never seen again. The Benders just targeted the wrong man this time, and they have no clue that the outhouse is about to collide with the windmill, or the toast is about to hit the floor, marmalade side down. Kerplat. The reason that this is the turning point for the Bloody Benders is because not only is Dr. York a prestigious member of his community, but his brother is a retired colonel in the Union Army who was recently elected by the state legislators to the Kansas Senate, and he's also an attorney. Naturally, he is very interested in his brother's disappearance and gathers a dozen or so men and heads to Labette County to investigate. Colonel Senator Attorney Alexander York puts up a $1,000 reward, which is $24K today, and the state of Kansas, per the governor's order, puts up $2,000, which is just shy of $48,000. So a $70,000, $72,000 reward. That is impressive. While Senator York waits for tips to come in, he and his men continue investigating. With assistance from willing townsfolk, they do an entire sweep of the county, looking for Dr. York. Afterwards, they all meet for a meeting to discuss what, if anything, they found. Paul and John Bender attend the meeting, and while everyone is like, sure, yeah, you can check our property, the Benders just sit quietly and don't say anything. After the meeting, they scurry home. About a week or so later, their neighbors notice the Benders' animals are crying in distress. They investigate and find the animals starving to death, and that the Benders are gone, disappeared, skipped town, poof. Here's how the Benders do it. When a traveler decides to spend the night at the Bender Inn, they talk amongst themselves privately and determine if the traveler will be a target. If it's a yes, they have them sit in a strategic part of the kitchen with their back to the canvas, separating the private quarters from the inn and general store. This way, the victim is positioned directly above the trapdoor to their cellar. At this point, pretty Katie, the daughter, distracts them while Paul approaches from behind the canvas, raises a sledgehammer, and and bashes in their skulls. Yikes. As soon as the victim collapses, Katie and John lift the trap door, kick the body into the cold concrete cellar. Pa then jumps down into the cellar, slits the victim's throat from ear to ear. Once the blood is drained, they carry the body outside and bury them in their backyard. Totally a family affair, and you can see why they are called the Bloody Benders. While Pa, Ma, and Katie are handling the victim, John's role in all this is to peddle any items belonging to the victim that they can't keep. They would, of course, keep all the cash, jewelry, watches, but then they had to peddle items like horses, wagons, buggies. So John travels into the nearby Indian Territory and has no trouble selling those items. After the neighbors realize the Benders appear to have skipped town, Senator York and the elected township officer descend upon the Bender Inn. It's obvious they moved on as most of their belongings are gone, save for a few hammers, a knife, a German Bible, and a clock. When they open the door to the Bender Inn, the odor of rotting human flesh just hits them like a ton of bricks right in the face. They quickly trace it to the trapdoor, and nervous about what they may find, they hesitate before grabbing the handle and lifting that open. To their surprise, the cellar's empty, save for what they decide has to be rotten, congealed human blood. You and I know it's from all the slit throats. Shocked they didn't find bodies, but convinced by the odor emanating from the cellar that there are bodies nearby, they head out into the Bender orchard and begin scouring the grounds for anything suspicious. Out there they find several rectangular indentations in the ground, and one squarish one. They begin digging, and very quickly find feet. Ooh. Yikes. Dr. York, Senator York's brother, right, is buried head down with his feet barely covered by the ground. So what, they threw him in long ways? Don't ask me why, that's so weird. So Dr. York is found, head bashed in, and throat slit. As the days pass, they continue digging and find Henry McKenzie, William McCrotty, Ben Brown, George Launcher and his daughter, and an unidentified male. Someone decides to check the well, and there they find the body of Johnny Boyle. The Benders just chucked him down the well. I don't know what that's about. There are some accounts that say they found the body of a man named John Greery, as well as an unidentified female. I don't know. It is believed that initially they store the bodies in the cellar until the ground is soft enough to dig, like in the winter months. However, it seems they quickly learned from the stench that that is not a good option, and decide to dig these shallow graves during the warm months and then cover them with wood, gourds, and other farmstead items to hide them until they need them. Interesting fact about the young daughter of victim George Launcher. She is the only victim whose head is not bashed in and her throat not slit. In fact, there is no sign of what caused her trauma. The general thought is either they knocked her unconscious and buried her alive, which I figured there would be evidence of, or they just poisoned her. How sad. But interesting that they showed compassion on the daughter. The whole thing is just a nightmare. As Senator York's investigation broadens, he finds the Benders' abandoned wagon near a train station in Thayer, Kansas. A ticket clerk working the counter tells them he sold tickets to Humboldt, Iowa, to 4 people matching their description. So from Iowa then, we know they would have easy access to travel south through Indian country to end up in Texas, or north to Kansas City, and then east from there. If we take a glance into their past, and behind the curtain, we find that the Bender family is just not what they seem. Pa, or John Bender Sr., is actually John Flickinger. John Jr. is John Gebhardt. Ma Bender, or Kate as she went by, is actually Almira Meek Griffith, and Kate is Eliza Griffith, the 5th of Ma's 12 children. So Ma and Pa may be married, don't really know, and John and Eliza may also be married. If so, then it's, I guess, just simply blended family, since Eliza is Almira's daughter. However, who in the heck is John Jr.? With a different last name, he can't be Pa's son unless his last name was an alias. I don't know. Where did the name Bender come from? I don't know. Are they all Benders? Are none of them Benders? Where'd they get that? I don't know. So unless one of their surnames is wrong and they were father and son, or like I said, an alias, rumors fly that John Gebhardt and Eliza Griffith are lovers, as they're always acting flirty towards one another. Some claim Eliza murders any children that come from their relationship. Others claim Elmira murdered several, if not all, of her previous husbands, having been married nearly a dozen times. Interesting note, scary note. Her husbands all died from mysterious head wounds. Yikes. Unfortunately, the Bloody Benders were never caught. That's creepy, right? The number of victims they claimed in Kansas was more than 11, but no one truly knows how high it went. How long had they done this? How long had this operation been going for? Did they do this in other cities? Did they murder people individually before they formed their twisted, sick little family? After they left Labette County, it is thought that they split up. It is believed that Ma and Pa went on to St. Louis and maybe on to Michigan from there, and that Eliza and John perhaps fled to Mexico or else the territory west of Texas, known at that time as outlaw territory. Some also believe Eliza went with Ma to Michigan. Some believe Pa committed suicide in Lake Michigan in 1884. I find that unlikely. While several posses claim to have captured, killed, and dumped all four of the Benders, the reward money was never claimed, and no one would do that and not claim $70,000. That's ludicrous. The Bloody Benders, a family of sociopathic serial killers who enjoyed murdering folks and stealing their belongings. Question is, did they really split up permanently, or just long enough for the dust to settle? Did they stop murdering after Labette County, or did they resume their operation elsewhere? Did they murder individually, or recruit new members into their Bender family? It's too many questions for me, too many loose ends. That's why I'm glad this happened a long time ago. Well, that's all for this episode of Serial Killers. If you enjoyed this video, please take a quick second to like it and subscribe to my channel, All Things True Crime. The subscribe button is right below the video, and then ding the bell, that way you won't miss my next video. I upload on Tuesdays. On the next episode of Serial Killers, we are going to dive deep into the life and crimes of John Wayne Gacy, aka the Killer Clown, a prolific American serial killer and sex offender who, during his reign of terror, tortured, raped, and strangled at least 33 young men. He earned the moniker the Killer Clown because he was an amateur clown who performed at charitable events, political fundraisers, and children's hospitals. Claiming to have multiple personality disorder, he blamed the policeman personality that he called Bad Jack for his crimes. This will be a remake. My original video about Gacy has audio quality issues. I assure you, the remake will be worth the watch. So catch his twisted story, troubled upbringing, chaotic descent into madness, his stomach-churning crimes, and eventual downfall and subsequent ending right here on All Things True Crime. It's truly chilling. Until next time, stay safe. Clementine Barnabet is the first ever recorded female African-American serial killer and the most prolific serial killer in Louisiana, which is saying something since they have the fifth most in the United States. She does not have a catchy serial killer moniker, whatever, so I've decided to call her the Voodoo X Murderer. Ooh. She's an American serial killer who is convicted for murdering one person, but in the end confesses to 35 murders. Her victims are at least 12 African-American families in towns running along the Southern Pacific Railroad that runs through Louisiana and Texas. All of the murders occur after dark, and an axe is used to fracture the skulls of her victims. Yikes, sounds pretty terrible. And the blunt force trauma really reminds me of Yang Zhen Hai, the monster killer. I made a video about him not too long ago. You should check it out. Clementine's twisted story begins when her family moves to Lafayette, Louisiana in 1909 and has a very disturbing beginning, a quite baffling middle, and a super strange and chilling end. Even though Clementine ends up being convicted of one murder and confesses to 35 murders, the real questions are, did she do any of it? Did she act alone? Or was she just one murderer in a group known as the Human Five? Odd questions to ask, but I'll explain it all right here, right now. Hey there, I'm Misha. Welcome to All Things True Crime, or welcome back if you're a regular. If you enjoy this video, please like it so more people will see it, and then subscribe to my channel so you won't miss my next video. The subscribe button is right below the video. Then if you ding the bell, you will get notified the next time I upload. That's All Things True Crime. Let's dig in. So the story of Clementine Barnabas begins around 1894 in St. Martinville, Louisiana. Her mother is a stay-at-home mom, and her father is a sharecropper. And that is a person who lives and or works on someone else's property for free in exchange for farming their land and then giving the owner a significant share of the harvest. In his case, he only works the land. He and the family don't live there, doesn't he? He and the family don't live there, doesn't live there. This means their very basic needs are met by this job, but it is hardly a living. To supplement his income, he takes a part-time job as a petty thief. Great. Nice. What a guy. His extracurriculars include engaging in multiple affairs on his wife throughout their marriage and beating on his kids. What a swell guy. Yikes. Clementine has 3 brothers, but we only know the name of one of them, Zephyrin. It also seems like she is raised with him and not the other 2. Not sure why this is. 1, 2, 3, 4. I like these 2. Can we just give these away? No, I have no idea what happened to the other 2. I'm just being ridiculous. For unknown reasons, but presumably for work, the family moves to Lafayette in 1909. Little do people know this sets the stage for what is about to become a hellish few years for residents of Lafayette and the surrounding area, specifically the African American community, as a person or persons with a deep darkness welling up inside embarks upon a murder rampage the area has never before seen, with some of the most brutal murders in the history of the state. The family settles into what is considered the rundown part of town. Shortly after, a family is found massacred with an axe in their home in a town 18 miles away. A woman and her 3 children are brutally executed in their home by an intruder who slipped in after dark for the express purpose of murder. Ha ha ha. I'm a doofus. So, it's January 1911. Authorities in West Crowley, Louisiana, 27 miles from Lafayette, respond to a call. Another family has been hacked to death with an axe. This time, a man and his wife and their young child are all found dead in their beds, their skulls split open. The blunt force trauma indicative of an axe. Dots are connecting. Although you may be asking, how is a dirt poor teenage girl with no vehicle able to travel 18 miles for one massacre and 27 miles for another? Well, as I mentioned earlier, all of the towns are along the Southern Pacific Railroad, so the person can easily catch a ride on a train, like a hobo, and travel between cities. And this won't be the only time a serial killer has made like a hobo and traveled from city to city via a train to murder. Given the time frame in which these murders occur, the age of the murderer, and her mental state, being careful to not leave evidence behind while trying to cover your tracks seems less important than it is later in time. When police respond, they find blood everywhere. The victims are in blood-soaked beds, their eerie bloody footprints trailing across the floor to an open window. The front door is locked, so police presume the murderer entered through an open window, not to mention the creepy footprints that head that direction before vanishing. Creepy. Even creepier yet, weirdly enough, super weird, a bucket of blood is found in the corner of the bedroom, and the bloody axe is resting at the head of the bed. I don't have words. A little over a month later, another similar incident 30 miles away. This time, a man, his wife, and their 2 children. Police finally start to connect the dots. At this point, for reasons not exactly understood, Clementine's father is arrested. Well, I guess I take that back. We do understand it, but one of his mistresses turns him in after a big fight. Wish this wasn't the only time I've heard that story. So after this huge fight, the mistress tells her friend he may have committed the most recent murders. As you can imagine, one thing becomes another and he is arrested. Both Clementine and her brother testify against him, saying he came home in bloody clothes one night, and another saying he bragged about the murders to them. I don't really buy it, especially if Clementine is the murderer. Of course, if she is the murderer and she wants to cast doubt on herself, find a scapegoat. Mean, abusive Daddy-O, who was already arrested for the murders, is the perfect target. A few months later, while he sits in jail, another family is murdered in the same exact way. A man, his wife, their 4 children, and a nephew. Same exact MO. Clementine's father is eventually convicted of the one family's murders. As for the family murdered while he's in jail, they live just a few blocks away from Clementine, and blood is found on her fence latch, and eventually on her clothes, so she and her brother are arrested. Shockingly, while they are being held with their father, yet another family massacre occurs, completely stumping the authorities. During this time, they search the house. They find bloody clothes with bits of brain matter stuck to them, and the bloody fence latch I mentioned before. January 1912, 3 more families are murdered in the same manner. The last family that's massacred, though, is where it all gets weird and begins spiraling apart, like it always does with these nutcases. So written on a wall in the murdered family's blood is a scripture verse, Psalm 9:12. And the note is signed off by the human 5. If you don't want to get caught, maybe don't leave a handwritten note and then sign it. Are you nuts? Well, yes, you are nuts because you're a serial killer, but still. So this is a huge lead for investigators who trace this name, the human 5, back to the Church of Sacrifice, which is an occult that teaches that wealth can be obtained through human sacrifice. What a bunch of crap. A few months later, by April 1912, Clementine breaks down. Just confesses to murdering 17 people right there. She confirms the human sacrifice teaching is correct. On the occult, they're saying that a priest or priestess even provided her with a charm bag that was meant to protect her from getting caught by the authorities while she pursued this human sacrifice in the name of the church. I thought it was in the name of wealth, but whatever, right? She eventually confesses to a total of 35 murders. Her story is very self-contradictory, but she nevertheless says she was involved in 35 murders. She says she decided to murder the children so as to have them avoid the pain of being orphans. Okay. She lists accomplices, telling investigators they drew lots to see who would be chosen to commit each family massacre, but no other person is ever arrested or charged for the murders. She is sentenced to life in prison at the young age of 19. In 1913, she escapes from the Louisiana Penitentiary. She is caught later that same day and never tries to escape again. There is a very vague prison report that suggests Clementine receives a procedure while in prison. It is way before the time of lobotomies and them being a thing, so no clue really what they did to her. They just say that the procedure restored her to a normal condition, and after serving 10 years, they release her on good behavior, and no one ever sees or hears from her again. It's creepy. Sounds like someone who would haunt your dreams. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to this channel. Next week, we're going to learn about Campatamar Shinkaraya, known as the Campatamar Killer, or Canpatamar Killer, which apparently translates to one who hits under ear. His weapon of choice? A hammer. His motive? Pure pleasure. Is he nuts? Probably. He is responsible for at least 70 murders in and around Jaipur, Rajasthan between 1977 and 1978. I've heard the number could be as high as the triple digits. Catch all the details surrounding this hammer-wielding psycho next week, right here on All Things True Crime. It's truly chilling. Until next time, stay safe. Countess Elizabeth Bathory de Esquet, known as the Blood Countess, and Countess Dracula, is a Hungarian noblewoman who is an alleged serial killer. In the year 1610, Bathory and 4 of her servants are accused of torturing and murdering hundreds of girls and women between 1590 and 1610. While some call it a witch hunt, others say the proof is in the pudding. Let's walk through the Countess's disturbing story. Hi there, my name is Misha. Welcome to All Things True Crime. Welcome back if you're a regular. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like it, share it, comment, and subscribe to my channel so you won't miss my next video. And then ding the bell, that way you will get notified the next time I upload. That's All Things True Crime. It's truly chilling. Countess Elizabeth Bathory d'Este, I'm sure I botched that, but whom I will just call Bathory for this video, is from the family of Bathory, a Hungarian noble family of the Gukleg clan. This family rises to significance in Central Europe. During the late Middle Ages or late medieval period, they hold high military, administrative, and ecclesiastical positions in the Kingdom of Hungary. In the early modern period, the Bathory family brings forth several princes of Transylvania, one king of Poland, and one Grand Duke of Lithuania. The Bathorys can be traced back to two Swabian brothers, Gut and Kalad. Swabia is a region in southwestern Germany. It's believed that they immigrated to Hungary during the reign of King Peter, so sometime between, 1038 and 1046. There are two branches of the Bathory family. Elizabeth comes from the younger branch, the Bathory of Ested. Bricius has two sons, John and Luke. The elder branch of the family descends from John, the younger from Luke. Okay, enough of that. Just a brief history lesson for some context. So Elizabeth Bathory, or Bathory, as I choose to call her, is born in 1560 on a family estate in the Kingdom of Hungary. Her childhood is mostly spent at the castle. Her father was a baron and her mother a baroness. Bathory is the niece of the King of Poland. She has several siblings. She is born into a religious home, is taught Latin, German, Hungarian, and Greek. Obviously, they are a wealthy family with a prominent social rank. As a child, Bathory suffers from seizures, probably epileptic seizures. At the time, epileptic seizure symptoms are diagnosed as falling sickness, which is great, not really, since treatments include rubbing the blood of someone who doesn't suffer from falling sickness onto the lips of the person that does suffer. Or giving the sufferer a mix of the non-sufferer's blood and a piece of skull, just as their seizure is ending. Or giving them the blood of a decapitated man. Okay, enough of that. Poor girl. Not just because she suffers from an illness that society doesn't understand and can't treat, but also for having to taste and drink blood, and perhaps eat the skull? Okay, yikes. Okay. Some believe during her formative years, Bathory is trained by her family and the family's officers to be cruel, and this partially explains her later serial killer cruelty. Some stories go that as a child, she witnesses her family's officers using brutal punishments on people, while other stories add that some family members entrusted to her, teach her, are themselves involved in Satanism and witchcraft, and so those were taught to her as well. These are just unsubstantiated stories, but would help explain her later behavior. Who knows? Another unsubstantiated and disputed story, but interesting, is one in which Bathory gets knocked up by a peasant boy and gives birth at age 13. The family gives the child away to a local woman that they trust, and the child is taken into Romania. Evidence of this comes up way after her death, but only by rumors that are spread by peasants, so it is disputed. It's very interesting, though. In 1573, at age 13, and after the whole potential pregnancy baby giveaway thing, Bathory is engaged to Count Ferenc Nadasdy. His family is a major Hungarian aristocratic family. As such, it is a political arrangement, basically. The two are wed 2 years later, which results in combined land ownership in both Transylvania and Hungary. The Count's wedding gift to Bathory is a castle his mother gave him. This castle will come back up in a bit. Castle of Szeged or something. I don't know. In 1578, 3 years into their marriage, the Count becomes chief commander of the Hungarian troops, and he leads them in war against the Ottomans. During this time, Bathory manages business affairs, the family's multiple estates, is responsible for the Hungarian and Slavic people, provides medical care during the Long War, and is charged with the defense of her husband's estates. So, she's busy during this time. Threat of attack by the Ottomans was significant, as various villages and other areas had been plundered by them in the past. Bathory intervenes multiple times on behalf of destitute women. sometimes women whose husbands become POWs, and one woman whose daughter is raped and impregnated. She seems like an organized, super supportive, compassionate, team player, very intelligent, capable woman, for sure, but that right there gives her that end to those destitute women, being there to protect and provide medical care, perhaps gives her the connection she needs, the large numbers of women during the wartime, that need help. Husbands are gone, mom and daughters are away, this perhaps is where she gets her victims. I don't know. Bathory and the Count have a daughter born in 1585 named Anna. Their other known children include another daughter born in 1590, yet another daughter born in 1594, a son born in 96, and a final child, another son born in 1598. Stories say they have another son, but it can't be confirmed. And since he isn't included in her will, it would seem he died young or didn't exist. It seems they had another son. This one did die as an infant. So. The Count dies on January 4th, 1604 at the age of 48. Not sure what the illness is, but in 1601 it first manifests as severe pain in his legs, which progresses to debilitating pain, which eventually renders him partially disabled. He is unable to ever fully recover, and in 1603 becomes permanently disabled. He and Bathory are married for 29 years when he passes. Before he dies, he entrusts Bathory and his heirs to a powerful Hungarian magnate who eventually serves as the Palatine of Hungary. This guy will lead the investigation into Bathory's crimes here coming up, so dun dun. Around 1602, 1604 time frame, rumors of Bathory's atrocities have spread throughout the entire kingdom. As a result, a Lutheran pastor, Istvan Magyari, makes a public complaint and one at the court in Vienna. In 1610, King Matthias II assigns that same Hungarian magnate, Bathory's husband, entrusted her and his heirs to the Palatine of Hungary to officially investigate these claims. The Palatine immediately orders 2 notaries to begin collecting evidence. It's March 1610, and by October, they have 52 witness statements. And then by 1611, that number has risen to over 300. It is believed that Bathory begins by torturing and murdering daughters of the lesser gentry, which gentry are like well-born, genteel, well-bred people of high social class. Sounds fancy. But lesser fancy, still gentry, but just not top-notch gentry, okay? Anyway, so she starts by murdering the daughters of the lesser gentry, who are sent to her women's quarters by their parents to learn proper etiquette. She uses multiple forms of torture on all of these girls and women. Some of the witnesses say relatives didn't make it out of her quarters after sent there to learn etiquette. Others claim they saw evidence of torture of dead bodies, some of which ended up being buried in proper graves, while others were buried in unmarked graves. And I mean, when they looked at dead bodies, they saw evidence of torture on the bodies, not evidence of dead bodies being tortured. That's just weird. I'm kidding, right? It's all crazy. So by December 12th, 1610, the investigation is at the point where officials agree that Bathory is responsible and should be imprisoned and her estate distributed. On December 30th, 1610, Thurzo, which is that Palatine guy, travels to Bathory's castle and arrests her and 4 of her servants, as they are accused of being her accomplices. Thurzo claims in a letter to his wife to have found 1 dead girl and 1 still alive, when he showed up unannounced at Bathory's and arrested her. There are a few different stories here, but it seems that he shows up while she's having dinner, and he busts her in front of all of her guests. Some say he found her covered in blood and in the act of torture, but the overwhelming majority of stories say she was eating dinner. Thurzo meets with Bathory's son Paul and 2 son-in-laws to discuss how to move forward. Her family rules Transylvania, and they want to keep her property, which was at risk of being taken back by the crown as a result of her actions. Initially, the plan is that Bathory will be sent to a convent, but as the story of all that she did traveled and spread, they have to change plans and instead decide to confine her to the castle for the rest of her life. Most witnesses testify that they heard accusations from others but didn't witness it firsthand. Since her 4 accused servants confessed, while being tortured, no less, their confessions are a little shaky. No, they're complete garbage and not credible at all. So the king orders the servants to be executed after they confess under torture. 2 of them have their fingers ripped off with red-hot pincers and then are burned alive. Due to the young age of one of the servants and the belief that he was less involved, he is treated to a compassionate execution, simply beheaded. Then his body is burned. Another servant initially escapes but is captured and burned alive. The final one receives a life sentence since it is believed that she was also abused by the others. Given the time these murders are committed, authorities never retrieved any hard evidence against Bathory or her servants. All accusations are based on rumors. Typically in this time period, complaints are written against anyone who does even the smallest thing wrong, and no complaints were ever written about her aside from the pastor. So, now given her nobility, it's not really surprising. Also, if rumors are that she tortured and murdered girls, I'd imagine that people would be less likely to go up against her. During her 2 trials, witness testimonies vary in the number of victims' lives that she took, but the highest came in at 650. Rumor is the servant girl saw this number written in Bathory's private murder book. The claim was never verified and the book was never found, so who knows? I'd say someone that powerful has help from law enforcement and court officials. Not really hard to bury evidence. Also, King Matthias owed her a great debt, which was disappeared, just written off when she's arrested, so perhaps there was motive there, I don't know. Nevertheless, on January 25th, 1611, Thurzo writes to King Matthias and informs him Bathory has been captured and confined to her castle. She is only confined for about 3.5 years, then she dies at 54. Some say she was confined to a brick room, others say that she was able to move around freely and unhindered in the castle, more similar to what we would consider like house arrest. About 4 months before her confinement, she leaves all of her possessions to her children. In the days leading up to her death, she signs the Will of Sorts, in which all of her estates, land, and possessions are distributed to her children. On August 20th, 1614, in the evening, she complains to one of her guards that she is cold. He dismisses her and tells her to go lay down. She goes to sleep and never wakes up. She's buried on November 25th, 1614. Some say due to the villagers' hostility towards her, her body is moved to her birth home and interred at the Bathory family crypt. The location of her body is unknown today, but believed to be buried deep in the church area of the castle. The church and castle bear no discernible markings of her grave. Seems like her preferred methods of torture ranged from piercing victims with pins and needles, inserting nails underneath fingernails, whipping them, stabbing with scissors, biting until blood appears, smearing them with honey, and then allowing insects to bite them, taking them outside in the winter and throwing buckets of water on them. Well, that's creepy. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like it, share it, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Next week, we're going to learn all about Jack Unterweger, an Austrian serial killer who was convicted of life in prison for murdering one woman, then was paroled after a huge campaign that included writers, artists, journalists, and politicians. Once released, he became a minor celebrity, hosting television shows and working as a reporter. Within months of his release, though, he resumed murdering, eventually being convicted of 9 more murders and is suspected of murdering an additional 3. Tune in next time to hear this guy's unique and interesting story, right here on All Things True Crime. It's truly chilling. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe. Juana Barraza, also known as the Little Old Lady Killer, is a Mexican serial killer and former professional wrestler who was convicted of murdering 16 elderly women, but likely murdered nearly 50 between 1998 and 2006 by bludgeoning or strangling them before eventually robbing them. Hi there, my name is Misha. Welcome to All Things True Crime, or welcome back if you're a regular. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like it, share it, comment, and subscribe to my channel so you won't miss my next video. And then ding the bell, that way you'll get notified the next time I upload. That's All Things True Crime. It's truly chilling. Juana Barraza is born on December 27, 1957, and Epazayucan, Hidalgo, Mexico. I'm sure I destroyed that name, my apologies. This is a rural area north of Mexico City. Her mother is an alcoholic prostitute, and her father is a police officer. When Juana is 3 months old, her mother takes her and begins, or continues, a relationship with her stepfather. So Juana's mom is sleeping with her own stepfather. As a young child, Juana is never taught to read. She has a pretty rough relationship with her mother, no surprise, right? One story goes that when Juana is 12, in exchange for 3 beers, she gives Juana to a man, pimps her out, just gives her to him for a couple of beers. What a piece. So this dirtbag repeatedly rapes her while she's in his care for 4 years, and she gets pregnant twice, once at 13 and the other time at 16. Both end in miscarriages. When her mom dies of cirrhosis, she leaves for Mexico City. Here she's married and divorced several times, resulting in 4 children. Her firstborn dies from injuries he sustains during a mugging, or some sources say a gang shooting. Either way, he's just 24 years old when he dies. She's always had an interest in lucha libre, a form of Mexican masked professional wrestling. During the 1980s and 1990s, she takes up professional wrestling under the ring name of La Dama del Silencio, or the Lady of Silence, which is in reference to her own shy and quiet personality. It seems her life of crime begins in 1995. She has just delivered her 4th child and is broke busted. In desperate need of money, she begins shoplifting from stores, which naturally evolves to breaking and entering / burglarizing homes. In 1996, her and a friend devise a plan to start stealing from the elderly. They both dress in all white and pretend to be nurses. This works, and the old people let them into their homes. They make sure that they live alone. Once inside, they rob them. Unfortunately for Juana, her partner is married to a corrupt federal police officer, and the married couple devises a side plan to extort her. The cop husband shows up at a house Juana is robbing and demands 12,000 pesos in exchange for not arresting her. I don't know the outcome of that situation, but I wish I did. Okay, in 2000, she retires from professional wrestling and gets desperate for money, even though she only makes around 300 to 500 pesos per fight, which currently is 15 to 25 bucks each fight. Around 1998, brutal murders of the elderly in Mexico City begins to increase. This leads the media to speculate that these murders are the work of a serial killer they dub El Matavietas, or something like that. Note that the L indicates they believe the serial killer is a man. The Mexico City police deny that the murders are connected, and they arrest and charge a variety of people for the various murders. Juana targets her first victim on November 25, 2002. Once she is inside her apartment, instead of robbing her, Juana claims the woman made derogatory comments. This makes her mad, and she begins to beat the elderly woman and then strangles her with her bare hands. She doesn't kill again for around 3 months. From that point onward, her crimes increase rather sharply. By November 5, 2003, law enforcement has enough evidence and witness testimony to conclude a serial killer is at large and posing as a medical professional or government representative. Due to some internal government conflict, the police are nervous to release their findings and thoughts to the public. Her victims are all women aged 60 and older, most of whom live alone. She bludgeons or strangles them to death and then robs them. The chief prosecutor in Mexico City initially believes the murderer to be very clever, careful, and brilliant. He suggests that the unidentified subject probably strikes after gaining the trust of each victim. Law enforcement goes further to suggest the murderer is likely posing as a government official, reaching out to people to sign them up for various welfare programs. The police have a hard time narrowing in on her as a suspect, and that's due to conflicting evidence. It becomes so confusing that at one point they believe these murders may be the work of 2 murderers. Another fact that muddied the waters is that 3 of her victims all own the same painting, a print of an 18th century painting by the French artist Jean-Baptiste Grez called Boy in a Red Waistcoat.
As the murders continue, investigators believe that Juana is a psychopath who feels no remorse. Welcome to the majority of serial killers. So somehow, Juana is associating her elderly female victims with her mother and believes she's helping society by murdering them. Okay. Since she poses as a government worker, signing folks up for welfare, she falls into the caregiving category of serial killer, even though she wasn't a nurse or anything like that. I'm not sure I agree with that. Law enforcement screws up multiple times, and eventually the media criticizes them pretty heavily, actually, for dismissing evidence that pointed to a serial murder case. Authorities say that idea is just media sensationalism. This is late summer 2005 at this point. As the early days of the investigation drag along, the criticism continues as one journalist refers to the investigation as ham-fisted and unproductive, a swoop on the transvestite prostitutes in Mexico City. Transvestite prostitutes. I'm not going to unpack that one, just going to leave it alone. It is in November 2005 that the Mexican authorities reveal that witness statements indicate the murderer is wearing women's clothing to gain access to the victims' homes. One witness says they see a large woman in a red blouse leaving the home of a victim. A few months later, the law enforcement officers begin examining the victim's fingerprints, something about believing the serial killer had committed suicide. Okay. Starting in mid-2005, she begins dating a man who becomes her accomplice. At this time, the crimes increase in range and frequency, and the time of day changes from daytime to nighttime. They target the wrong lady, a woman who is the mother of a prominent Mexican criminologist. This leads the police to launch a special operation. They begin patrolling the areas more heavily, handing out pamphlets, advising the elderly to be careful around strangers, and sketches of the suspect. Seems they even went as far as paying elderly women to be bait. She pauses murdering from sometime in October until the end of January 2006. On January 25, 2006, there is a significant breakthrough in the case. A suspect is arrested while fleeing the home of the latest victim. The victim is an 82-year-old female who was strangled to death with a stethoscope. To the shock of just about everyone, the suspect arrested is a female named Juana Barraza, a 48-year-old female professional wrestler. Apparently, previous witness accounts mentioned seeing a masculine-looking woman. Back to the transvestite prostitute thing I said I would leave alone. Law enforcement officers had been looking for a transvestite and later admitted Juana did in fact resemble the composite images of the suspect. So they think she looks like a transvestite, okay. Juana very much resembles the images. She has close cropped hair that is dyed blonde, a very distinctive mole on her face. When she is arrested, she is carrying a stethoscope, pension forms, and a fraudulent card that identifies her as a social worker. The prosecutors say fingerprint evidence links her to at least 10 murders. Juana admits to 4 murders and denies the rest. Despite her being illiterate, a search of her home by police results in them finding a trophy room with newspaper clippings of the murders, along with objects taken from the victims, and an altar to 2 folk saints commonly respected by Mexican criminals. In the spring of 2008, she is tried, with the prosecution alleging her involvement in nearly 50 murders. On March 31st, she is found guilty on 16 charges of murder and aggravated burglary, which includes 11 separate counts of murder. She is sentenced to 759 years in prison. As I have mentioned a few times, South American laws weren't designed with serial killers in mind. With that said, sentences are served concurrently, and the maximum sentence is 60 years. She will almost certainly spend the rest of her life behind bars, dying in prison, as her parole won't come until 2058, when she is 100 years old. Speaking about her victims, she said, quote, "When I saw them, I felt much anger and more when they acted uppity or believed that because of their money, they could humiliate me." Well, that's creepy. If you enjoy this video, please remember to like it, share it, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Next week, we're going to learn all about Nikolai Zhumagliev, known as the Metal Fang, and Kola the Man-Eater, a Soviet serial killer and cannibal who murders and cannibalizes 10 victims from 1979 to 1991. Deemed not guilty by reason of insanity, he is admitted to a psychiatric hospital. Years later, during transport to another facility, he escapes. Sounds like the Russian take on the Halloween franchise. I'm kidding. Maybe. And he is on the run for nearly 2 years, during which time he murders again and is only recaptured because he wants to be. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe. When Kathleen was 18 months old, her father stabbed her mother to death. Here is one of her diary entries in which she is talking about one of her deceased children, Laura. She refers to Laura as, quote, a fairly good-natured baby, and later writes, quote, thank goodness it has saved her from the fate of her siblings. I think she was warned. I am my father's daughter, end quote. Chilling. Hi there, I'm Misha, and welcome to my channel, All Things True Crime. In each video, I like to cover a serial killer's life from as early as I can through to their conviction and or death. One thing I like to do here before we walk through the crimes is to help us understand and see the entire picture. We should all hate serial killers. They're terrible people. There's no question about that. Everyone agrees. But I like to pull the curtain back and show you their traumatic childhoods and how they're often victims of extreme abuse and neglect, which in no doubt contributes to their future murderous nonsense. Nature versus nurture. When we look at their past, we can often feel so sorry for them as children and then feel such hate for them as adult, murderers. It's kind of fascinating, actually. So, it just goes to show how complex people and situations are. It's not cut and dry, black and white. It's very gray. We'd love to think that these dirtbags are just born with red eyes, trying to murder people at like 8 months old or something. That'd make it pretty easy. But most of the time they're born, sweet little babies and just crapped on by their parents, abused by every adult in their lives until they just finally snap. So, I'm not trying to make you sympathize with killers. I'm just trying to explore the complexity of the human condition as it relates to serial killers. If this is something you'd enjoy, please subscribe to my channel, All Things True Crime, so you'll be notified every time I upload. Kathleen Folbig is born Kathleen Donovan on June 14, 1967. At around 18 months old, on January 8, 1969, her biological father brutally murders her mother by stabbing her 24 times. The day after the murder, he's arrested and sentenced to 15 years in prison and then is deported to Britain. As you can probably imagine, Kathleen is then declared a ward of the state after being classified as a neglected, destitute child, and she's immediately placed into foster care. Relatives tried to care for her at first, but were ultimately unable, saying she had severe temper tantrums, aggression, and crying fits outside of the ordinary for a toddler. It is believed by forensic psychiatrists that she was sexually abused by her father before he went to prison. Not long after being placed with her first family, she's removed and placed in a home called Badura Children's Home. After she turns 3, her situation deteriorates further, with reports concluding that she's a very disturbed little girl who becomes aggressive towards other children. A few months later, she's removed again, moved into what would become a permanent foster home. She's classified as a child with specific needs. As expected, she has no memory of her father murdering her mother, but experts believe her catastrophic early life experiences and disruption of attachments within a violent and abusive family origin deeply affected her psychology. In this foster family, she has 2 much older siblings. Her mother calls her cold and controlling. She becomes close to her sister, who testifies at her trial that she is capable of looking someone in the eye and lying outright to them. I mean, that's pretty sociopathic, right? Her report with the state mentions her having, quote, problematic sexualized behaviors as a very young child, end quote, and, quote, difficulty regarding her intellectual functioning, end quote. She proves to be domineering towards the other children and often a very difficult child. She's a loner at school, has feelings of social isolation, and trusts no one. Despite all this, she stays here until she's 15, at which time she leaves school and marries a man named Craig Folbig. The year is 1987 or 1988. the records are a little conflicting. Their first child is born on February 1st, 1989. He is supposedly a noisy breather and is diagnosed from a young age as having a mild case of laryngomalacia. Apparently it's the most common cause of chronic stridor, or a harsh or grating sound that infants can make. Something to do with the upper larynx's cartilage, still soft and immature, which causes it to collapse during inhalation, which in turn causes airway obstruction and that grating noise that you hear. Typically, children outgrow this as that cartilage matures and everything. On the evening of February 20th, so kids like 19 days old, Kathleen the Crazy puts Caleb to bed in a nearby bedroom. He has a rough night, fussing from around midnight to 2 a.m. Big whoop. I mean, my wife and I have dealt with fussy babies from 1 p.m. to 7 a.m. The next morning, have you heard of colic? She supposedly discovers Caleb dead sometime in the night or early morning. He's 19 days old, as I mentioned. His death is attributed to cot death, or SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. She and her husband are, of course, utterly devastated at the loss, but they push onward, and on June 3rd, 1990, give birth to a baby boy named Patrick. This time, Craig stays home with Kathleen for the first 3 months to help care for her and the baby. Suspicious, anyone? No. Maybe he just knows her and that she needs the help, and that's okay too. Just wondering here if he's being a good husband and father, or if he is worried or suspicious. On October 18th of 1990s, so that's a few months, 4.5 months, Kathleen puts Patrick to bed. Okay. Of course she did. Why wouldn't Craig have put him to bed? Later that night, Craig is startled awake to his wife's screams coming from the nursery. He rushes in to find her standing over the baby's bed. He sees that Patrick isn't breathing and begins performing infant CPR. He takes a second to call for an ambulance, and Patrick is taken to the hospital, where he is later diagnosed with cortical blindness and epilepsy. Cortical blindness is either partial or total loss of vision caused by damage to the brain's occipital cortex, usually caused by loss of blood flow. Congenital is caused by stroke, encephalitis, or meningitis, but that's not permanent blindness. So at the hospital, little Patrick is diagnosed with these two conditions, but the nearly life-threatening event he is seen for remains unexplained. 4 months later, he dies from seizures. On February 18, 1991, Kathleen calls her husband at work and tells him their son died, saying, "It happened again." After this loss, the couple moves to Thornton, New South Wales, a suburb of Maitland. Kathleen gives birth to their third child, a daughter named Sarah, on October 14, 1992. She dies on August 29, 1993, at 10 months old. Once again, SIDS is to blame. Possible? Sure. Probable? No. In 96, they moved to Singleton, and here is a journal entry. Dated June 18, 1996, Kathleen writes, and I quote, "I am ready this time, and I know I'll have help and support this time. When I think I'm going to lose control like last times, I'll just hand the baby over to someone else, not feel totally alone. Getting back into my exercise after will help my state of mind, and sleeping whenever possible as well. I have learned my lesson this time." It's a little bit cryptic. Chilling. On August 7, 1997, Kathleen gives birth to Laura. Here is a journal entry dated November 9th, 1997. Kathleen writes, quote, "Craig was pretty drunk Friday night. In his drunken stupor, he admitted that he's not really happy. There's a problem with his security level with me, and he has a morbid fear about Laura. I don't know, there's nothing wrong with her, nothing out of the ordinary anyway, because it was me and not me. I think I handle her fits of crying better than I did with Sarah. I've learned to, once getting to me, to walk away and breathe in for a while myself. It helps me cope and figure out how to help her. With Sarah, all I wanted was her to shut up, and one day she did." Would you say that? Of a loss? I don't know. I mean, she's clearly disturbed, but still. Another entry on January 28, 1998, right around a month before Laura dies, Kathleen writes, "Very depressed with myself, angry and upset. I've done it, I've lost it with her. I yelled at her so angrily that it scared her. She hasn't stopped crying. Got so bad I nearly purposely dropped her on the floor and left her. I restrained enough to put her on the floor and walk away. Went to my room and left her to cry. Was gone probably only 5 minutes, but it seemed like a lifetime. I feel like the worst mother on this earth. Scared that she'll leave me now, like Sarah did. I knew I was short-tempered and cruel sometimes to her, and she left. With a bit of help. I don't want that to ever happen again. I actually seem to have a bond with Laura. It can't happen again. I'm ashamed of myself. I can't tell Craig about it since he'll worry about leaving her with me. Only seems to happen if I'm too tired. Her moaning, bored, whiny sound drives me up the wall. I truly can't wait until she's old enough to tell me what she wants." Girl is super disturbed, very inconsistent. Loving in one breath, hateful in the next. Yikes. She needs medication for sure. And, probably jail time for murder. Well, on March 1st, 1999, Laura dies at 18 months old. Here she's playing in their pool the day before her death. Once again, SIDS is to blame. SIDS is real, but I mean, SIDS. As in the past, they call for an ambulance and they perform CPR until they arrive. Unfortunately, it's too late, and Laura's gone. Kathleen later describes her death as the result of a coughing fit she had in bed. I mean, I don't think so. Kind of, it's a garbage excuse. Craig admits he had his suspicions, but couldn't really wrap his head around it until he discovered her journal entries. What he read made him sick to his stomach, and he immediately took it to the police. Before she's arrested for the deaths, she is reportedly seen rehearsing her story for trial and making sure she cries at the right times. Innocent? I don't think so. Also interesting that she's always the one that discovers them when they've died. How convenient is that? That's very convenient. So Kathleen is arrested April 11th, 2001. During the trial, Craig and Kathleen's foster sister are witnesses for the prosecution. The sister cites examples of Kathleen showing aggression towards the children and a drastic mood swing during Laura's funeral. Kathleen goes from crying to happy and laughing, enjoying the party. A neighbor recalls visiting them after the death of Kathleen, and she was not upset at all. No tears, no sadness, nothing. And when the neighbor asks her how this could happen, she replies, "Just like the rest of them." On May 21st, 2003, so a couple years later after her arrest, she is convicted of murdering her 4 children. 8-month-old Patrick, 10-month-old Sarah, 19-month-old Laura, and 19-day-old Caleb. And she is sentenced to 40 years behind bars, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The cause of death, they say, is smothering. In the years since her conviction, significant scientific advances have been made, and her lawyers have asked geneticists to take a look. So I've made this video before, but I'm remaking it because there's been an update. So these geneticists have begun digging into her background, her makeup, and this has resulted in doubts about her guilt, and a petition signed by many scientists has circulated asking for her release based upon their research, which they can't claim proves her innocence. These scientists claim to have uncovered a rare mutation in a gene shared by Kathleen and her daughters. It's called CALM2 G114R and causes sudden death in infancy and childhood. The 2020 study claims these mutations altered Sarah and Laura's heart rhythms and is a reasonable explanation for their deaths. It's reasonable doubt, right? Maybe so, but what about the 2 boys? Well, one maybe died from seizures, but the other, if only the girls share the mutation, then it kind of falls apart. But as the scientists continue investigating, they discover that the boys, Caleb and Patrick, carry a different rare genetic variant that has been connected to epileptic deaths in mice. One of the pediatric geneticists who signs this pardon petition says the evidence for natural death is stronger with the girls than the boys. On February 5th, 2005. Upon appeal, the courts reduced her 40-year sentence to 30 years and her possibility of parole from 30 years to 25 years. Those that have signed the pardon petition include 2 Nobel laureates, the president of the Australian Academy of Science, and many other scientists from Australia and 8 other countries. In 2019, the petition failed and her conviction was upheld. She claims her journal entries were written from a place of blame, not from guilt of murder, but mom guilt that she couldn't have prevented the deaths, which, is plausible, right? Prison guards at the Silverwater Correctional Complex where she is being held call her manipulative. They say she manipulates other female inmates and attempts mind games with the guards. In 2017, it was reported that she assaulted a fellow inmate for taking a toaster into a cell, as it is a fire hazard. She punched the inmate in the stomach and then immediately asked the guards for the footage so she could watch it. Her lawyers claim she wanted the footage because she was shocked, horrified, and embarrassed by what she had done. Are you freaking kidding me? That's garbage. Thankfully, the judge was like, this is ridiculous, and gave her a 4-month sentence for the assault. After the assault, she's transferred to Cessnock Correctional Center. In January of 21, during yet another transfer, this time to Clarence Correctional Center, not sure why she was transferred, she's assaulted and gets a black eye and some bruises from women who don't want the likes of her in their units. Good for them. Okay, so here's where it gets interesting. In March of 21, a petition signed by more than 100 scientists calls for her pardon by the New South Wales governor. On June 5th, 2023, she is granted a full and unconditional pardon. Genetic evidence published in 2020 supposedly supports that at least 2 of her children had those genetic mutations that predisposed them to sudden cardiac death. The other 2 children carried 2 potentially lethal genetic mutations in a gene linked to early onset lethal epilepsy in mice. That's hard. Coincidence? I think so. I don't find the evidence used to exonerate her compelling enough. I guess they're just looking for probable cause, though. I mean, reasonable doubt, right? So, but on the other side, if she is innocent, I'm glad she was released. If she's guilty, it's a shame she was released. These types of situations are unique and unclear, right? Well, that's a wrap for this episode of Serial Killers. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel, All Things True Crime, so you won't miss my next video. The next episode of Serial Killers is all about Dennis Rader, known as BTK, an American serial killer who bound, tortured, and murdered. There is a pretty significant difference there. 10 people from 1974 to 1991. He seemingly disappears for around 13 years and resumes taunting police in 2004 with a planned murder date of October 2004. And a target already identified for slaughter. Yikes. It's a unique story with a lot of twists and turns, creepiness, and a fair amount of luck for investigators that eventually seal the fate of this evil scumbag over 30 years after his first murder and 13 years after his last. This is Serial Killers. Until next time, stay safe.